Hey, it's Mazzy, and welcome back. Ophelia is dead. Marianne Faithfull. I'll get to that comparison later when I showcase a comp here and get into a little bit of a background here. But this is just a tribute to Marianne Faithfull, who just died yesterday as of this recording. Marianne Faithfull, original pop ingenue from 1965, folk singer, pop singer, has a massive hit in 1965 with a Jagger Richards composition called As Tears Go By. This is the American copy that I have, rechanneled for stereo, unfortunately. But an interesting notation on this, and I don't think I ever realized this till I kind of dived in. When I was in the UK last summer, I picked up this album, Come My Way, on Decca. This is the original Decca copy from Marianne Faithfull in 1965 as well. Well, might be a slightly different track list and obviously a different cover, I don't know, but both these albums in the UK were issued on the same day in 1965. The label wanted to make her this pop star, which happened, and she wanted to be a folk singer. And so somehow Decca Records reissued both these, actually issued both these albums on the exact same day in 1965. Now, the wonderful version here was the debut of that song, As Tears Go By. The Stones wouldn't release it, their version, put out their version for another 2 years. So she was the first, and it's a beautiful version. I had the single, I never had one of her albums until way into the late 1970s, aside from actually this comp I got in the mid-70s, or this American release, which over here came out on London Records, same label of the Stones were on here. And obviously you can't talk about Marianne Faithfull without talking about the intertwining with the Rolling Stones. I'm not going to obviously do a whole biography, seek it out. It's a great story, it's a tragic story. That parallel with the Ophelia character from Hamlet is there's a reason for it. But this is really a wonderful record. She does Come My Way, Jabberwock, a traditional song, Portland Town, another traditional song, another version at the time, House of the Rising Sun. So many artists did that song, from Bob Dylan into the folk scene, and of course the Animals made a huge pop hit out of it, more electric. Fare Thee Well, a lot of traditional, wonderful folk songs, American and British folk songs on here. Bells of Freedom, Four Strong Winds, that wonderful Ian Tyson song, one of my all-time favorite folk songs by Ian Tyson. Of course, that song was covered years later by Neil Young as well, one of his favorite songs. But just this beautiful, she had this beautiful kind of light voice. 1965, Marianne Faithfull. Things changed a lot, and I don't have a lot of the songs there. Decca puts out a record in 1969, and the B-side was a song that she wrote with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards called Sister Morphine. It was on the B-side of her record, and in the UK, Decca withdrew it right away because of the drug references, obviously. And I don't think it was ever released in America. Of course, 2 years later, the Rolling Stones recorded and put it on Sticky Fingers. At the time, there was a bit of a controversy because her original single, she was one of the co-writers, and when the Stones put it out, her name was nowhere. So there was a legal suit happening, and finally, on later editions and publishing-wise, she got her name on it. But it was a rough road for her. 1966 to 1970, she was Mick Jagger's girlfriend, and with the Stones, she got busted, got addicted to heroin, went through a really horrible period, was homeless for several years on the streets of Soho, and just went into a tailspin in the pop music business, including the Stones, I believe, just kind of let her go. And it's a tragic story. Read her autobiography from 1994, I think it came out. I read it years ago, and it's well worth it. It's just it reveals pretty much everything. But let's talk about the positive side of the music. 1979, she came out with a record called Broken English. And a friend of mine, again at Warner Brothers, gave me this promo copy. It has a warning about explicit language, which it does have all over this. And I remember this was played all over the radio. This was played in dance clubs. This is like a punk, really a post-punk in 1979 piece of dance music, and beautiful, beautiful, intense record. And all of a sudden we heard her voice of this, laryngitis problems, her voice, the years of drug abuse, just literally changed. And this became this wonderful kind of a comeback album, a comeback story 10 years later with it. Broken English, the song that she codes on here, which is song. She does a great version on here, really intense, like percussive dance version of John Lennon's Working Class Hero, and hearing her do it just adds another dimension. It's as good in a different way as John Lennon's original folk version, so it's kind of interesting where she was so enthralled in folk music, and John does that kind of Dylan-esque folk version on Plastic Ono Band, and she does this upbeat dance version on this. But this, again, 1979 on this, and then the following year, this album comes out, and this is pretty much a follow-up. This is as good. This is Dangerous Acquaintances. Wonderful record. Again, another upbeat kind of dance record, post-punk pop record, I should say. But really a great record. These were on Island Records. She gets signed to Island, and Island's a big part of this period throughout the 1980s. And there's a great comp, which I'll get to later, CD comp, that came out. And these are really records, very favorable. But you wouldn't even imagine it is the same artist, the same vocalist as the 1965 As Tears Go By, or that folk record from 1965 on Decca Records. So she has a little bit of she's still, during this period of time, she's still a junkie. She's still strung out on heroin, on coke, but she's pushing through and doing these records. And something changes in 1984, 85. She's contacted by Hal Wilner, the great producer, who we just lost during the pandemic, put together a series of records, from cover records, bringing different artists of different genres, Thelonious Monk, Kurt Weill, Bertolt Brecht, did a number over the years. And he contacted her and brought her back to do this album, Lost in the Stars, in 1985. And she does a beautiful collaboration with guitarist Chris Spedding, The Ballad of a Soldier's Wife. This is, again, the music of Kurt Weill here, and it really kind of suits her. And I'm not quite sure if this is the reason that really changed the trajectory and I'd say the genre direction of her career after this. It's beautiful, that low, throaty voice, instead of the upbeat dance thing that was happening, she kind of went into almost like a Marlena Dietrich, a Billie Holiday, I don't want to say Nina Simone, not this perfect voice, but it was suited for this material. And all of a sudden, things change. And a couple years later, Hal Wilner brings her back. And this is from 1987 on Island Records. And she does this great, wonderful album called Strange Weather. That is a song, I believe, written by Tom Waits, Kathleen Brennan. The album opens up with an integral part of this album is the guitar playing of Bill Frisell, great kind of jazz crossover fusion, sometimes avant-garde, sometimes very just serene and ambient in a way. Opens up with this kind of guitar sound that is the strange intro, and she goes into the Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Just a beautiful rendition of that with Bill Frisell on guitar, another artist, and violin on there, a very kind of gypsy lounge sound of the Kurt Weill, the 1930s Germany, that kind of sound, 20s and 30s. So beautiful here. She does songs on here by Doc Pomus, Hello Stranger, the rock and roll record. She does I'll Keep It With Mine, a great cover of the Bob Dylan song on here. And interesting enough, she goes back and does a version here in 1987 of As Tears Go By. Reading her biography and hearing interviews with her over the years, that song kind of haunted her for all these years. And it's so interesting how she brings it back. Like that's the beginning, that's the kickoff in 1965. 1987, she brings it back again with a dark, moody version of it, a beautiful version, and almost to the end of her career, second to the last album, which I'll get into, she does it yet again, 3 times as far as I know, the recordings of that. But this is a beautiful, wonderful record. It's got a great, great mood to it, and it just has a great, great feel to it. So this is 1987 on Island Records. Now, I don't have in her entire catalog. I would dip in and out of it over the years, obviously vinyl in those cases, and then of course I would get immersed into the CD era. This is a record that came out, I believe, in 1994, so I'm jumping a little while, and this is called A Secret Life, with another beautiful, beautiful cover. I'd say this is my least favorite of the records that I have. It's still beautiful and still interesting. Now, this goes in a little different direction. This was arranged and produced by Angelo Badalamenti. He is the composer who worked all through the 90s with David Lynch, obviously the theme for Twin Peaks and all the David Lynch films. So he's got that kind of mood to his music. The orchestrations are more so than what Hal Wilner did with her. I really prefer when they bring back the string arrangements. They have maybe smaller groups like the Bill Frisell on Strange Weather. But it is a beautiful record. Every once in a while, it goes into that haunting sound or theme-like thing that Angelo Badalamenti does a lot with David Lynch, like the Laura Palmer theme or the Twin Peaks theme. So it kind of shakes me back to that mood. And it works, and her voice is great. Again, it's slow. It's a slow mood thing, but it's a beautiful record. Probably it wouldn't be first on my list if you have none of her records. It's funny, I posted this couple of records I'm playing on my Instagram, Mazzy's Music. Follow me on Instagram. And I was surprised a number of comments that know of her as the Rolling Stone girlfriend, but had never really heard her music, or they don't think they heard her music. So I was compelled to come down to my collection and do this video. And all yesterday I played her records for probably about 6-7 hours and her CDs. And, you know, you kind of get teased when, you know, people jump on the bandwagon when an artist dies. But when something happens like that, you want to hear the music of an artist that you have. And having the extensive library I have, obviously it kind of reminds you of those things, and you want to be close to it in some ways. So I'm not an apologist that I am doing a tribute here. I just think that's the reason. And you see all these posts on Instagram and everywhere else, and articles right now about other musicians who've collaborated over the years with Marianne Faithfull. And this is the time to remind us again what a great artist and a tragic figure to some extent, but she survived. She's a survivor, and she pulled out of it. So, you know, that is pretty much the reason why I'm doing this. After the Island years, she switches and she signs to RCA Record, and I don't know how many albums she had on RCA, because after this I kind of fell off the train a little bit, but she does this album, and all these other albums, she always kind of had her toe into the Kurt Weill, that kind of sound. This is an entire album of Kurt Weill, Bertolt Brecht songs. If you don't know who Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht were as writers, Three Penny Opera and others, you definitely know at least one of their songs from the first debut album by The Doors, Alabama Song. I had no idea that was a cover when that album came out. Take Me to the Whiskey Bar, that is one of their songs. And that is Alabama Song that opens this record up. It's a beautiful album. It's like a torch song album of those kind of songs. The only time I ever saw her live, Marianne Faithfull live, was around the time Strange Weather came out. And she did a very intimate show at a club called Slim's, co-owned by Boss Gags in San Francisco. And I don't remember the makeup. It seems, my sense memory kind of is telling me there was either one guitar player or a piano player in her, and she was on a stool, sitting on a stool. I could be wrong, but that's how I remember it to be, but I don't remember which it was on that, but it was just beautiful. And, you know, the audience was so focused and quiet, standing audience, but really, really lovely. But this is a great album. And on some of these albums too, sometimes she'll start and end an album, or within it there might be a couple of pieces of her reciting poetry over some thematic things, or an intro or an outro. I'll get to that in a little bit. Anyway, this is called 20th Century Blues. I don't know if it's on vinyl, but it's a wonderful CD. Next, I'm jumping ahead to the year 2000 with an album called Vagabond Ways. This was co-produced by Daniel Lanois at his studio Teatro in Ojai, California. That's the theater turned studio that he worked with that great album called Teatro by Willie Nelson. And he worked with Emmylou Harris there and some other artists. And this is a really different album too. Again, soothing songs, more cover songs on here. It opens up with the song that she co-wrote called Vagabond Ways. And it goes into a track that I was not aware of. You Pink Floyd fans will probably understand this and know about this. It's Incarceration of a Flower Child. It was a Roger Waters song he wrote in 1968, but Pink Floyd never recorded it. Apparently, some say, which he never confirmed, it's about Syd Barrett, and it's kind of a dark, moody song. When you listen to it, you can really hear how Roger Waters would sing it somewhat, and he actually plays bass on it. So that's kind of interesting. There's a couple of originals on here, and she works with other artists, lyricists, poets working on some of these songs. There's a beautiful version of Tower of Song, the great song by Leonard Cohen, and a song that I wasn't familiar with, I don't think, for Wanting You, Elton John and Bernie Taupin. And it ends up with After the Ceasefire, a collaboration with this poet and Daniel Lanois doing a lot of his electronic loops. You know, Daniel Lanois worked extensively with U2, and a lot of times he has these kind of loop sounds and mechanical things of guitar tones and pedals and things going on. And there's a lot of that on here, but it doesn't take away from it. And it's a beautiful recitation by Marianne. So that's one of her closing out poetry pieces. But it's really a beautiful album here. Vagabond Ways, Marianne Faithfull from 2000. The final album that I have in my collection is her second to last album called Negative Capability. I'll jump ahead for a second just to give you, she did do an album after this, which I've never heard, and it's more of a recitation album of poetry with Warren Ellis, the collaboration from the Bad Seeds with Nick Cave, doing the music and the arrangements on that. And I'm really interested in hearing it because I love her voice, and I love, you know, her speaking voice that she does on a lot of these albums, including this one as well. Now, this was co-produced by Warren Ellis. Nick Cave, obviously, sings and plays on 2 or 3 tracks on here, and I love those collaborations. They're subtle, but you hear that kind of background harmony. And those of you that know Nick Cave and heard the last maybe decade of Nick Cave's records, this has that kind of feel of the Nick Cave Warren Ellis combination of things of them. Not the upbeat, fast, bombastic side of Nick Cave, but the eerie, slow, moody side of it, spiritual side of it. And it's all over this record. This came out, I think, in 2018. So it's the last proper album of song-based things that she's done. Just a wonderful, wonderful album. I got this when it came out. Here's the gatefold on it. It's a peaceful album. You can really hear, her voice still sounds good in the same way that sound for decades. It's that harshness of the voice. It's a ravaged voice, but it's a believable voice, and it's really a beautiful. It's like someone who smokes cigarettes, has taken drugs all her life, which probably she has a good portion of her life, but she came out of it. Lastly, before I close, those of you CD people, even if you're not a CD person, I don't know if this ever came out on vinyl, but if there's ever a time, you know, her records deserve to be in print and to be out. But I would say this would be the perfect time in the next 6 months or a year to put out A Perfect Stranger, the Island Anthology. This is a wonderful anthology of songs from her entire catalog of Island records, from broken English, the dancey, upbeat, post-punk stuff, to the more intimate Kurt Weill, Stormy Weather, Hal Wilner type of things. I believe there's a track written by Bono that was never released that she recorded on here. But this is a wonderful record. Now, in the beginning of this video, I referred to Ophelia because there's a great essay in here by Ann Powers, the music journalist. Look at that beautiful picture there. This essay starts with this. In 1969, at the heart of her notorious reign as the crown princess of swinging London, Marianne Faithfull gave a triumphant performance of Ophelia in Hamlet. To say the role was suited for her would be almost a comical understatement. If you know the story of Ophelia, she was set to marry Hamlet, and she basically was pushed and went crazy, went bonkers, went mad. And in a way, it's kind of a parallel thing. She played Ophelia in London, and it kind of happened to her with the drug scene and the homelessness, and pushed out of what was happening in the pop world. And, you know, she was from the princess of the pop world to the pauper on the streets of London. So if you have no Marianne Faithfull, I would say one of the places you may start is this 2 CD comp. And this is the Island Years, A Perfect Stranger. Not only do you get the upbeat, post-punk, dancey versions of broken English, you get those Hal Wilner wonderful kind of intimate Hal Wilner produced Kurt Weill songs, and you get some other things on here, including a mid-period version of As Tears Go By. A fantastic double set. Obviously, as a proper album, this might be my favorite of that period and of that. I think it's probably her best album from my point of view as an overall album. Of course, if you're looking for the early stuff, something like this. But, you know, this is probably better as a singles artist. I don't know if there's a greatest hits aside from that of the early Decca years. There wouldn't be a lot of hits there, but it might be interesting, especially if they combine the pop and the folk music from Marianne Faithfull. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Good night, Ophelia. Good night, Marianne. So long, Marianne. Mazzy loves you.